First is, suffering is prevalent. That's first awareness. Suffering is just everywhere. So, second is, the suffering teaches us, reduces our pride. We are not beyond suffering. We are human beings. We have karma. We are often deluded. Of course, we will have sufferings. But you become more aware, but they too are impermanent. You become aware that even sufferings, though they are prevalent, but they're impermanent. So you become aware of the impermanence of the sufferings. And then particularly with people whose sufferings impinge on us, like people who are suffering, like you are a health professional, but you have difficult clients and so on. But actually, why are you so depressed about the depressed patients? That's your job. That's your commitment. You should think like that. This person gives me a reason to wake up every morning. This person gives me reason to train and have profession all these years that I can at least provide my service. Instead of being depressed about the depressed patient, one should have usefulness of one's existence. See, you got awareness, another awareness, usefulness. It employs you. It keeps you fit. It keeps your registration intact. and also, the moment you understand, you're aware of this awareness of prevalence of suffering, impermanence of suffering, and usefulness of suffering, because suffering teaches us to practice the best qualities of humanity: generosity, the compassion, the tolerance, the forgiveness. You have worked so hard, you earn so much, but for what? If you have someone not to share with, then it gives a reason. You have good reason to share the things you have saved for. Then you have good reason. So you don't think that you shouldn't have a dependent in your family. Those who have no dependent are lonely and suffering more. So it's good to have dependent, whether they are your patient or whoever it is. Don't try to idealize that, wish I didn't have a dependent. Those who have dependent, do not have dependent, they actually don't have meaning. They have no one to look for. They'll hug a dog or something. Of course, dog is also dependent, sure. Dog is probably more useful to us than we are to them. Some people draw a lot of happiness by having pet because at least dog never argue, Dog doesn't have the same degree of delusion and selfishness as human beings have, They just have a small food and they stay happy, You see, even dog is we do it selfishly for ourselves. If he's limping, some people put down when the dog is no longer walking well. They put down the limping dog. See, that's the story. That's a clear-cut reason whether we are keeping the dog for us or for the dog. So it's very clear. It's important to understand the usefulness of suffering. As I said, it reduces all afflictions, particularly pride, because all suffering are created by afflictions. So when you experience suffering, it prevents you from practicing suffering and its causes. So you got to give some tick. You got to tick the sufferings. Tonight we should tick the boxes. What good suffering does. That's the Buddhist approach. What Buddha said, Arya Satya. Dukkha Arya Satya means seeing the suffering as noble, means it ennobles you when you see the suffering. Because then you know there is no one who is not affected by sufferings. Most are not even aware what they are caused by. And hence they are completely hands tied down. They don't want suffering, but they're creating it unconsciously. Now when you know that, you become much more, I would say, attentive to those who are around you, who you have a responsibility, commitment, whether it's professional or whether relationship, whatever you have. You feel not judging them for their suffering. You don't feel angry at their suffering, because anger is your suffering already. So how could a suffering person help another suffering person, So you realize that this person who may be needy and demanding is actually actually see whether you are a cow or not, whether you're a milkable cow or not. So if you're a milkable cow, you should let them milk the cow. Otherwise, why you're here eating the grass every day for? So we have a service to provide. We have something to offer. Whether it's a mother or sister or only brother or uncle or grandfather or stepfather, I'm sure there's one in every one of us that you have to pull up your socks and be there for someone whose suffering makes us to practice kindness, whose suffering forces us to practice generosity and selflessness and sacrifices. If we don't have anyone to practice this, we will feel even more miserable. So therefore, let's give a break to suffering. Suffering actually makes our existence more useful and cohesive. Another reason that suffering is, suffering evokes compassion. One of the highest virtue of all spiritual traditions of humanity teaches how to practice kindness. But you don't practice kindness to people who are not suffering. Kindness is an understanding of suffering and then attend to their need. And particularly in professional affairs, compassion is very important skill on top of your professional knowledge. Not just by what is written in the books, but really integrating compassionate way of speaking, way of attending to the patient, to the clients, to the families. No matter how good a professional you are, however skilled you are, it's considered very secondary skill if it doesn't go with compassion. Compassionate one understands suffering and the severe problem that it presents, and therefore has wisdom to dispense skillful, kind words, a small act of kindness, even though you have to go out of your way a little bit. Maybe textbook doesn't say you should practice kindness. It says give this drug, if not raise the dosage. It says things like that. But you try to add whatever is going to complement to the benefit of the person. So therefore, compassion, suffering evokes compassion. Suffering tests whether we have compassion or not. So next time, instead of feeling angry to someone who has a depression or anxiety, either in a family or a client, instead one should feel this person is actually at least making me to practice kindness and selflessness. And when you do practice those are the highest giving, though no material value could match. So therefore, when we practice, when we have people suffering any kind of mental illnesses, such as depression and anxiety, when we know that this is the benefactor of compassion. Yeah, this is the one who is actually sponsoring me to practice. Otherwise, you can say, I want to practice compassion today, but nobody's going there. I want to feel like practicing compassion, but you don't have anyone. So if you have people who have debilitating illnesses like depression and anxiety, particularly that are connected with you, we all have a moral responsibility to practice compassion, not out of religious mentality, just as a humanity. You will feel your day is meaningful when you give something like that. You would not know how to suffer yourself like that because you are able to repel the suffering of others by your act of kindness. When somebody knows that they are somebody who cares about them, it can make the suffering a little bit terminated. So those people who actually suffer, they also need to know that somebody cares about them. The nurse or the doctor or the patient or neighbor did talk to them nicely and kindly for a change, on top of whatever their responsibility is. That touches and heals people more than any other thing people do. So this is some of the oldest human values that people need to realize. But this realization of doing things like that comes from this clarity of the mind. We have to have clarity of the mind that recognizes, I must practice compassion. Compassion is only practicable in face of someone who has such suffering, such as this. This person has a nice house, he's got other things, he's got all things, but still doesn't have skill to read the past correctly. He cannot read that thing is expired. He's illiterate, so to speak. He cannot read, and he keeps thinking it's still okay. And you are at least literate, We wanted to get rid of illiteracy, but everybody can read, but cannot read the mind. That's a terrible illiteracy, isn't it? So basically, it's depression and anxiety, and when we do not know holistically how to attend to it, we are illiterate about human mind, what it does and what it has a potential. Another thing is that as soon as you have the understanding of the mind, then you have awareness of the virtue of forgiveness to yourself. If it's yourself you're angry and depressed about, you forgive yourself.